There is no doubt that ancient man intuited a great deal of what we call the modern science of astronomy. They may have possessed something modern astronomers lack. That inward experience, of a living universe. Most modern individuals will deny the literalness of that statement. To most, the solar system in which we live is at best only an environment, it is a place in which things happen. We are associated with planetary luminaries and the sovereign leadership of the sun. The solar system is a wonderful, magnificent kind of machine. The solar system as we see it is therefore our house. The ancients began to think of it as a temple, a tabernacle, a shrine. Pythagoras referred to the sun as a flaming altar around which the chariots of the gods were driven in their orbits. We also sense that there was more to planets than first imagined. The belief that they were some kind of deities, they were sparks of light in the sky, and observations from the great astronomical towers of ziggurats on the plains of Babylon reveal that planets moved more rapidly than stars. To them was given the term, the wanderers. They moved in some remarkable procession around the sovereignty of the sun. They had orbits, and even several thousand years ago the ancients calculated these orbits with some accuracy. Probably at first the most practical purpose was divination astrology, sometimes called the Mad Mother of astronomy. It had come into being with the development of an accurate calendar, so the ancients knew how to record the seasons, and time, and finally, durations of ages. Astronomy was always a more or less sacred science. It was part of the priestly prerogative and all priests were supposed to know the motions of the stars and to be able to predict the changes of seasons. The old Kabbalists devised a concept that the solar system is a great person, a maker, a cosmic being called macroprospis, a common state or condition to the alchemists, where the solar system was a kind of tree, which grew up and the planets became the symbols of the sacred metals, and the various chemicals used in the preparation. In India, the planets in their orbits also provided the key for music, and in the musical modes. Nearly all Chinese and other Oriental instruments are arranged according to a concept of planetary interrelationships. Today we think that this is all more or less a superstition. We are loath to admit that we might be living within a vast cellular organism. But the more we study cells, molecules, atoms and electrons, the more it becomes evident that there are analogies between the solar system and the structures which make up the mass of matter. We are becoming more aware of the fact that there is no such thing as any inert substance. Everything is living material made up of life, and therefore it would hardly be proper to think of the solar system as dead. It would be better to think of it as the vast area of life, perhaps an area of seminal life, that is life in the form of seed, life which could under certain conditions unfold its own potential. From each seed might spring another solar system in the course of infinite ages. Other considerations from Paracelsus, we learn for example that it was the belief of the Egg-Lightened of old, that every solar system is fashioned in a way like an egg. The Hindus also had the mysterious egg. To understand the structure of a solar system, astronomy has its own ideas, and these ideas may be physically correct. Yet in no way does it exhaust the entire mystery of the matter. ancients were inclined to feel that the solar system was an allotment in place that is somewhere in the great field of life. A solar system had a right to exist, and a right to a place in which it could grow, in which it could extend its powers. Measuring and surveying of the allotment, William Blake shows deity in the beginning of creation, holding the architect's compass in his hand and drawing a great circle. This great circle became in symbolism the mysterious symbol of the sun itself. A dot in a circle, sometimes represented by the eye of Horus or an open eye in a circle. The first great movement was this tracing of the circle by the compass in the hand of the infinite. By the tracing of the circle it was said that the great powers began to fashion, as within the circular globe of an alchemical vessel. The solar system, as Plato points out, begins with the circumference and moves gradually toward the center. The wall of the solar system was what the ancient Kabbalist mystics in the valley of the Euphrates referred to as the wall of heaven. The fields of mythology, and all the great strange and incredible legends that arose not really from the study of star groups, but from ancient concepts concerning the divine world that rested beyond the boundary of the solar system. This area began to constrict from the circumference to the center. As it constricted, it left behind it 7 conditions of privation, which became to the ancients orbits or symbols of the pathways of planets. The first and most ancient being or god that was since to have been created by this procedure, was the deity who ruled over the final extremities of solar existence. This was Cronus, ancient Saturn. He was the first of the gods, the first differentiation within the solar system. As the first to come into being, he would be the last to go. In the process of the disintegration of worlds, he would devour all else that came from himself, as Saturn, or Cronus, is said to have devoured his children. Within the orbit of Cronus was Jupiter, so Jupiter overcame his own father and took over the rulership of the solar system. Jupiter therefore became the emblem no longer of despotism but of a constitutional authority, and the descent of these orbits. If we want to study it closely enough, we will find also the emergence of all forms of government, because each of these planetary powers ruled at one time in the dawn of things. Jupiter ruled not merely for his own pleasure, but for the benefit of the governed. He became the symbol of justice, whereas Saturn that had preceded him, was the symbol not of justice, but of tyranny. Gradually in that age, it said Jupiter brought forth order in society. Established from the great foundations of a benevolent leadership, but in the course of time, the Golden Age. Gradually in that age, it said Jupiter brought forth order in society. Not only established from the great foundations of a benevolent leadership, but in the course of time, the Golden Age. All that it implied was gradually vanished away, and in the place of the kindly, the rulership of Jupiter, the solar system passed to the keeping of Mars, or the god of war. Sometime remote conflict did arise in the world. With the conflict of things, there were great changes. This conflict was partly due to the Promethean episode, in which men gained a certain fire within themselves. Mars as a symbol suddenly revolted against the gods, and set up the tyranny of their own in the world. In this tyranny, they began to struggle with one another for the advantages of their own causes. We find in several different mythologies how war, and sorrow, and misery, increased upon the earth. We see how men so departed from truth, and took a principle in the wrath-like exploitation of their own ambitions. It said that God sent tempests, and deluges, and oblivions, and combustions, that swept away the world that had failed to keep peace out the rain. Mars then came into the peculiar situation that we find in ancient astronomy, for in this arrangement, the Sun is placed next in an orbit. So the world passed to the keeping of Helios, the sun god, the Apollo. The world passed to the keeping of a light, of a refugee, of a beauty. So with the rising of the solar orbit in the ancient philosophy, the world became inwardly and outwardly illumined. It was then that the visible sun as we know it in the sky actually came into existence as a condition, or a quality of light. Then it was also that its great symbol, the light of mind, or the light of reason, came. The eyes of light began to contemplate a universe by means of the light of intelligence. Then in the course of time, out of this dawning individuality, this rise of the sense of selfness, is the next orbit, or that of Venus. In the orbit of Venus, we have the world's tremendous unfoldment, first in the emotional pressures of life.
Flow penetrates egos in the dark of the broken. Dark of the ocean, dark of the ocean, dark of the ocean. Flow penetrates egos in the dark of the broken. Whoa.
Secondly, in the flowering of great arts, the arriving of beauty as a force of power, in the imagination of creation. This artistry of creative self-expression was an urge to reveal, or release the soul through advancements of all kinds of creativity. This pattern is accredited with having given to the world the mysteries of ambition, the strange psychic passions, and animal instincts which have later come to be so powerful after this next orbit of the planets. We had the orbit of Mercury, and the world was turned over to the rule of the intellect. Here mind began to take over all other considerations, the light of reason passed into darkness, and in its place was the dim candle flicker of thought, of intelligence. As we know it, everything then became a matter of formulas, of terms, and words, all with the coming of the orbit of Mercury. The alphabets, in all the writings, and readings of mankind. Sciences came into being, and all other forms of exact knowledge. Mercury became the symbol of formal education, and the rise of philosophic systems. The emotion of men also gradually and inevitably moved towards the sciences. The next orbit was given the moon, and it was held as having a true orbit. The moon became the symbol of illusion, and delusion. It also became an emblem of self-deceit. Perhaps, however, more originally in line with the older concepts, the moon was associated with the power of precipitating lives, from an invisible, to a visible state. The moon therefore was the gateway of generations. The moon provided a mysterious element, by means of which souls in a free state, were drawn toward body. It was because of the power of the moon, and the mysterious cycles which it exercises. It still recognized influence on the cycles of fecundity, that the moon is said to have provided the gateway, for invisible souls to enter into the earth. Ruled by a reflected light, and not a true light, the government of the moon was strangely the government of physical instinct. Based upon the procreative pressure in living things, all of these together, the seven then caused their energies and powers to center upon the common receptacle, the earth. The open cup of the earth poured all these influences, and these influences not only sent their rays and forces downward, but each ray carried a seed power within itself. All the planets of the solar system above, were reflected under the surface of the earth to become, orders of minerals, orders of gems, orders of substances, orders of chemicals, and orders of energy and magnetism. They also gradually sprang out and everywhere within creatures, these seven again repeated themselves in the rising of sensory perceptions. In the release of powers, in the building of organisms, each of which was a septenary structure in itself. Equally here we find also that the sensory perceptions are tied to the stars, as are the fates of men to the motions of heavenly bodies. Thus this whole strange wonderful system seemed to come into existence, and in so doing it established the relations of worship. It showed in the structures of religions, how the faiths of men were engendered, and sustained for each planet set up, its own religion, in its own time, in the cycles of the world. Some of these religions have continued, others have vanished away. But where they have vanished in form their energies have continued in new appearances. Man himself, in whom the universe and the solar system are epitomized. Man who has received his body from the planets, his soul from the stars. The mysterious spiritual eyes in the brain were believed to be active, which is no longer the case in the development of the relationship between man and his planet. The relationship between creation, and mental phenomena, and most of all the relationship as experienced in the consciousness of man, between the human being and the vast evolving patterns of space. Thus while geocentric astronomy is no longer regarded as accurate, astronomically and physically, there is much to indicate that geocentric astronomy is very accurate psychologically, since it deals primarily with levels of qualities with processes taking place in the invisible psychic structure of things, and not merely the physical processes with which we are acquainted. The physical processes of generation and corruption of life which we seize as only one aspect for a while. This is taking place while man seems to be going down to the grave. Man and the universe are moving upward, toward another destiny.
Me and sign machine. She said
Next time we will continue with some other arbitrary rambling.
Line, yo.